Every empire declares its money is sound. Every government swears its promises will last. And again, history proves both wrong. From Rome to France, from the Confederacy to modern Lebanon, ordinary people have awakened to find savings gutted, salaries meaningless, and futures seized by systems they assumed were solid. Collapse isn't the exception, it's the rule. The real question isn't whether financial structures fail, but how you protect yourself when they do. By the way, if you love money, subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Now, let's continue. The most dangerous error is mistaking trust for granite. We glance at balances and flags on our notes and assume bedrock. But money isn't stone. It is confidence, and confidence can evaporate between dusk and dawn. That is why history is both brutal and useful. Each breakdown leaves a map, patterns, lessons, and warnings about what preserves wealth and what dissolves into dust. Study the record and a constant emerges. The survivors were not the ones who trusted longest, but the ones who doubted first. Consider the Byzantine Empire, Rome's eastern heir that outlived the West by nearly a millennium. Its economy revolved around the gold solidus, a coin so steady that merchants from Europe to the Levant to Asia took it without argument. For centuries, it functioned like a medieval reserve currency. You'd think they would have learned from Rome's silver denarius debased into plated scrap by desperate emperors. They didn't. Centuries later, Byzantium repeated the temptation in gold. They shaved purity, thinned planchets, and mixed in cheaper alloys. At first, nobody noticed. Then, trust cracked. The solidus that anchored Mediterranean trade turned into political fiction. Debasement destroyed credibility, and stability bled out of an economy that had seemed immovable. What endured? Not proclamations, not paper promises. People who quietly held real gold or land beyond the easy reach of the court preserved wealth while others saw their money melt. That's the first lesson. States rarely resist dilution. When it arrives, value flees to assets no official can counterfeit. But not every collapse is minted in a palace. Sometimes it detonates from outside. In the mid-14th century, the Black Death ripped through Europe. Between 1347 and 1351, perhaps half the population died. Cities emptied, villages disappeared, trade routes fractured. Yet the economics were stranger than simple ruin. When workers vanish, labor becomes scarce. Wages rise, land and food, once scarce relative to people, become abundant. Families with liquidity coin, goods, or even just the ability to work suddenly had leverage. Abandoned houses and idle fields turned the survivors' world into a buyer's market. If that sounds familiar, it should. During COVID-19, supply chains buckled. Governments printed trillions to keep the gears turning, and inequality widened as those with liquidity bought assets while paycheck households slipped behind. In the United States, housing prices surged, equities rebounded with startling speed, and millions scrambled to cover rent. The rhyme is clear. Pandemics redistribute wealth. They always have. Survivors of the plague leveraged scarcity to climb. Survivors of COVID with cash bought property, stocks, and businesses others could no longer carry. Renaissance Florence showed how too big to fail can fall in a season. In the 1340s, Florence was Europe's financial capital, dominated by houses like the Bardi and Peruzzi. They lent heavily to kings, most disastrously to Edward III of England, who defaulted mid-war. When payments stopped, the banks toppled. Depositors were ruined, trade froze, and the city convulsed. Size was not safety. Reputation was not protection. The phrase, too big to fail, is as old as banking and just as false. Institutions exist to profit, not to guarantee your survival. Their promises hold until the day they don't. The pattern repeats across centuries, from Florentine failures to Lehman Brothers in 2008, to Lebanese banks freezing accounts in 2019. Survival belongs to people who remember that institutional guarantees are conditional and revocable, especially when your need conflicts with their balance sheet. The American Civil War is remembered for battlefields and emancipation. It was also a monetary war. Industrial-scale conflict demanded industrial-scale money. The Union issued greenbacks paper backed not by gold, but by the promise of the United States. The more paper circulated, the less each note bought. Inflation gnawed at trust. In the Confederacy, the disease became terminal. Graybacks flooded the economy. Prices rose by thousands of %. Soldiers' pay died between payday and purchase. By 1865, Confederate currency wasn't weak, it was dead. What mattered weren't slogans but hard things: land, grain, gold, fuel. Ordinary Southerners watched lifetime savings turn to smoke. Opportunists with access to goods acquired property at fire sale prices, the lesson Americans rarely hear. The country has already lived through currency collapse. Protection came not from trusting the paper in your wallet, but from owning what the system couldn't inflate. Revolutionary France adds another chapter in monetary self-destruction. In the 1790s, revolutionaries toppled the monarchy, seized church lands, and issued assignats paper-backed, in theory, by confiscated property. Issuance kept rising. Each new sheet diluted the last. Prices spiraled, wages lagged, and the assignat withered into waste. Farmers refused paper, demanding goods or silver. Bread riots returned, and the revolution devoured its architects. Winners weren't the patriots clutching notes. They were the people with food, specie, or property assets the state could not print. 2 centuries later, Asia relived the pattern at global speed. In 1997, a speculative attack on the Thai baht snapped an unsustainable peg and exposed heavy dollar-denominated debt. Once the peg broke, foreign currency liabilities exploded. Capital fled. Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea. Currencies tumbled in sequence, economies contracted, jobs vanished, and governments sought IMF rescue. The worst pain fell not on the hedge funds that sparked the panic, but on households whose savings shrank, whose mortgages doubled, whose employers folded. Those who held dollars or offshore assets endured. Those anchored to local currency drowned. Debt in someone else's money is a trap. By now, the picture is consistent. Across revolutionary France, Civil War America, and modern Asia, paper fails and debt chains both families and states. Survivors are not the loyalists to the system. They are the skeptics who prepare before the crack. And collapse is contemporary, not just historical. In Lebanon after 2019, banks locked their doors. Deposits were frozen, withdrawals rationed, and the Lebanese pound lost over 90% of its value. Lifetimes of savings shrank to pocket change. Lines stretched outside branches as families begged for access to their own money. Not only small savers doctors, engineers, retirees, the entire middle class. Anyone who trusted the system was wrecked. The lesson is blunt. Money in a bank is a loan you have made to an institution that can decide, in crisis, not to pay you back. Those who fared best had diversified abroad, held real assets like gold or property, or kept cash beyond bank reach. Everyone else was trapped. If this feels distant, remember 2008. Foreclosures surged, pensions cratered, and the arsonists were rescued. In 2020, governments printed trillions to keep the machine alive, fuel that inflated asset prices while wages lagged. In 2023, regional U.S. banks failed in days as depositors bolted, proving again that too big to fail is a story we tell ourselves until the day the doors slam. So, how do you defend yourself? History offers no single hedge. In Byzantium, it was gold. After the Black Death, liquidity to buy abandoned land. In Florence, refusing to bet your life on grand banks. In the Confederacy, hard goods. In France, food and property. In Asia, avoiding debt denominated in someone else's currency. In Lebanon, leaving before the locks clicked. Specifics change, the theme does not. Survival comes from recognizing what retains value when illusions pop. Here is the paradox. Collapse is ruin and opportunity. For the unprepared, it is devastation. For those with resilience, liquidity, or assets no state can print, it is a clearance sale. After the plague, peasants became landowners because fields outnumbered hands. After 2008, those with cash bought homes while millions were displaced. Protection is not only defense, it is positioning. The ability to buy when others must sell. Extend that logic into a playbook. Maintain a portion of dry powder, stress test assumptions, prearrange credit lines, and map assets likely to become forced sales. When shocks hit, mispriced inventory surfaces, distressed real estate, impaired loans, broken supply contracts, productive firms with liquidity gaps. Your task isn't to grab anything. It is to sift, verify title, liens, tenancies, maintenance backlogs, regulatory exposure, supply risk, and operating cash needs. Treat price as an output of risk, not an argument for it. Cheap without control is expensive. Set a buyer's clock. Phase 1 is chaos. Phase 2 is capitulation. Phase 3 is disbelief. Only in the last two does the edge appear. Use checklists, counterparty probity, custody frictions, transfer restrictions, insurance gaps, compliance paths, post-close value creation. Favor assets with durable cash flows or utility. Food processing, repair networks, warehouse capacity, logistics nodes, local power, water, data connectivity. Structure downside. First, escrow, holdbacks, earnouts, and seller financing to bridge valuation gaps while staying incentives aligned. Operate with humility. Plan for working capital spikes, replacement capex, and staff retention. Install simple metrics: throughput, cycle time, defect rate, unit margin. Exploit modularity, buy capability, not a fad machines, tooling, permits, distribution lists, brands that you can redeploy across terrain when context shifts. Don't chase bounces, stagger entries, hedge long-dated risk with duration-matched assets. Keep reputation liquid, pay on time, communicate clearly, share upside with partners. Deals flow to those who can close without drama. Build optionality now, not mid-panic. Map auctions, compile watch lists, model break-even prices, set pre-approved terms with lenders and suppliers. Remember, opportunity rarely arrives as a headline. It arrives as a call from a strained counterparty who knows you can perform. But wealth isn't only possession. It is production. Durable winners weren't merely people with coins or deeds. They were people who could create value when others could not. Bakers who kept ovens hot, smiths who repaired tools, farmers who fed towns, and merchants who moved goods across borders did more than survive. They climbed. In crises, money loses meaning, but making never does. People still need to eat, mend, build, and trade. Those who meet those needs are rarely poor for long. Extend the principle from craft to systems. Codify workflows, document SOPs, standardize parts, train apprentices, and schedule preventive maintenance. Bundle capabilities. Repair plus spares, food plus delivery, power plus monitoring. So, your offer remains essential when budgets are tight. Track unit economics obsessively. True input costs, shrinkage, uptime, yield, rework, lead time, safety incidents. Design redundancy. Second supplier policies, local stock buffers, offline backups, manual fallbacks for critical steps. Build trust ledgers, deliveries met, defects corrected, emergency turnarounds, because reputation moves faster than courts or insurers under stress. Open multiple payment rails, cash, wire, escrow, compliant commodity swaps, and route them cross-border where legal to avoid local frictions. Invest in micro-infrastructure, modular ovens, lathe workstations, 3D printers, solar with storage, water filtration, freezers, cold chain monitors, robust routers. Target needs that spike in downturns. Food processing, heating repair, network maintenance, parts remanufacture, last-mile logistics. Price with transparency and indexation. Write quotes that adjust for inputs, delivery windows, and regulatory delays. Keep books with disciplined weekly cash forecasts. Aging receivables, simple dashboards. Because clarity prevents death by creep. Partner laterally with nearby operators, share tools, swap staff in downtime, co-buy inputs for volume, and pool transport. Secure operations, hardware keys, segmented networks, immutable backups, rehearsed incident playbooks. Cyber breakdowns become trade stoppers when pressure rises. Prepare production go bags, key molds, critical drawings, starter stock, checklists, contact trees. If you must relocate, you relaunch fast. Above all, practice cadence. Ship on time even in small batches, invoice immediately, collect without shame, review weekly, adapt monthly, teach constantly. That is the deeper shelter, a blend of real assets, real skills, and clear-eyed awareness that illusions end. Every crisis is a transfer from the many who trusted to the few who prepared, from paper promises to tangible value, from passive savers to active builders. The question is not whether things fall apart, they do. The question is whether you will be left clutching promises or holding something real. History doesn't repeat, but if you ignore it, it will flatten you just the same. If you made it this far, drop a plus in the comments your badge for finishing the deep dive. And if you haven't already, Subscribe for more long-form stories where money, history, and power collide. Curious about earlier empires of capital? Check out our Others video,